It's graduation season, right? All these colleges, you're seeing everybody graduate, and high schools are starting to do it. And somebody who had a special graduation in her family that she's celebrating, which I will get to on the back end of this first clip, is Sunny Hostin. We talked about The View and how dumb they are. Here's, just in case you forgot, Sunny Hostin's view of America.
I worry about my children's future, especially my daughter, who now has less rights than I have. It's stolen land, first of all, okay? California is stolen land.
The biggest threat to our country today, says the FBI's director, is white supremacy and domestic.
Sunny Hostin seemed comfortable sitting behind that panel desk, speaking with the confidence of someone who treats daytime TV chatter like it's the same as real truth. But when Megyn Kelly steps in, that confidence starts to crack fast. The takedown doesn't just poke fun at Hostin's hot takes, it digs into the routine underneath them. Every sharp look, every dramatic pause, every moment of moral high ground turns into a setup for Kelly's punchlines. And in the end, Sunny Hostin comes off less like a serious voice and more like a loud headline without much substance behind it.
Yo, Megyn Kelly's reaction to Sunny Hostin's stupidity in this video is everything. Check it out.
If America is not the #1 global power, it's not going to be Denmark. It's going to be communist China, a country that right now the government is imprisoning Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps. It is a deeply racist government. It's a human rights violating government. It is a government that if they are the leader of the free world, we are not a free world the way that we are right now.
Megyn Kelly immediately addresses the contradictions. This is the same co-host who claims to stand up for women, yet often dismisses anyone who doesn't fall in line with her views. Kelly zeroes in on that gap. Sunny Hostin talks about empowerment, but at the same time builds a career around outrage and surface-level theatrics. It starts to feel less like lifting people up and more like performing for attention. Because in that kind of daytime echo chamber, it's not about evidence or real debate. It's about who can be the loudest and getting applause for it.
Well, fear not, Sunny, because look at the picture she posted just the other day. Here is her son graduating from Harvard. Yes, her black son graduated from Harvard, even though it's a country of white supremacists, and she's deeply, deeply worried for his future. I'm sure he has no chance ahead of him, Stu. The effing nerve of this.
Sunny Hostin has a habit of leaning into moral grandstanding, and Megyn Kelly turns that into pure comedy. Every time Hostin rolls her eyes like she's just uncovered some massive scandal, Kelly reframes it for what it feels like, a basic debate tactic dressed up to sound bigger than it is. The critique goes further, pointing out how volume often gets mistaken for authority, like a slow, condescending lecture can somehow make a thin argument feel deep. Kelly doesn't just push back. She chips away at the whole performance, questioning whether any of it really holds weight once the cameras stop rolling.
Sunny Hostin I think she went to Binghamton undergrad, and she went to Notre Dame Law School, which is a great law school. Her son right now is at Harvard. That son she wants us to think is sitting there oppressed, who she's got to fight on behalf of because America is so awful to him. They're educating him right now at Harvard University. And Jason, would you take?
The contrast between the two women fuels the entire moment. Megyn Kelly, who stepped away from major networks to build something on her own terms, appears to be a self-made presence. Meanwhile, Sunny Hostin feels tied to a panel setup where the loudest voice often ends up steering the conversation. Kelly leans into that contrast, pointing out the irony of Hostin presenting herself as a fearless truth-teller while operating inside a tightly structured format, complete with cue-driven reactions and predictable beats. Overall, it highlights a simple divide. One feels like she's owning the stage, while the other is just working within it.
Ladies of The View. Speaking of Sunny Hostin, take a look at SOT 15.
I worry about the working class. I worry about my mother, a retired teacher. I worry about our elderly and their Social Security and their Medicare. I worry about my children's future, especially my daughter, who now has less rights than I have. And I remember my father telling me many, many years ago that I was the first person in his family to enjoy full civil rights. And now I have less civil rights than I had when he told me.
Megyn Kelly pushes further by calling out how predictable the talking points have become. Day after day, Sunny Hostin steps into that role of moral referee, leaning on the same familiar buzzwords. Kelly pokes at the repetition, comparing it to a rerun of a tired sitcom. Everyone already knows the punchline, but the laugh track keeps rolling anyway. It's a routine that feels worn out, almost on autopilot. And yet, Sunny delivers it with the intensity of someone who believes it's still fresh, still groundbreaking, even when it sounds like something viewers have heard many times before.
Here's Sunny Hostin over on The View, accusing Israel of war crimes.
There is an international human rights body of law. And when you look at that law, part of it is retaliation against innocent civilians collectively is also terror.
Sunny Hostin's tendency to brush off opposing views becomes a major focus. Megyn Kelly points out that Hostin often treats those who see things differently as somehow beyond the pale, not just disagreeing, but viewing them as wrong. Kelly turns that into satire, framing Hostin like a courtroom judge running trials where the verdict is already decided. It stops feeling like a conversation and starts looking more like a one-sided script, with Hostin playing every role at once. Then there's the issue of selective outrage. Kelly points out that the most intense reactions appear to be directed towards specific targets, while similar behavior from others is overlooked. The inconsistency becomes hard to ignore. By the end, Kelly paints a picture of something less like fair analysis and more like performance, where the outcome feels predetermined and the presentation is what carries it.
Okay, California's stolen land.
The biggest threat to our country today, says the FBI's director, is white supremacy and domestic terrorism. Merrick Garland said the biggest threat to our democracy is white supremacy and domestic terrorism. How do you come together when it's homegrown terror? And we have never addressed why there is that issue that remains in this country 400 years later.
So we have white supremacists running around this country. It's the biggest threat we face. And she's deeply worried about her children's future.
The roast doesn't just stay on the surface, it digs into what's behind the performance. Megyn Kelly suggests that Sunny leans heavily on moral authority, because without it, the arguments don't carry much weight. Take that away, and what's left can feel more like quick sound bites and gestures than substance. Kelly even turns it into a joke, comparing it to a magician repeating the same trick louder and louder, hoping the audience still buys it. But this time, she's not playing along. Sunny's focus on identity-driven arguments becomes another target. Kelly mocks the tendency to sort every issue into neat categories, as if complex people and ideas can be reduced to simple labels. Then comes the question of credibility. Kelly built her reputation by challenging powerful figures, presidents, senators, and major players under intense national scrutiny. Sunny, by contrast, is framed as operating in a more controlled setting, where reactions are often predictable and supportive. That gap becomes the punchline. One comes across as battle-tested and used to real pushback. The other feels more protected, lifted by the environment around her. And Kelly leans into that contrast, questioning whether they even belong in the same arena.
Sunny Hostin I think she went to Binghamton undergrad, and she went to Notre Dame Law School, which is a great law school. Her son right now is at Harvard. That son she wants us to think is sitting there oppressed, who she's got to fight on behalf of because America is so awful to him. They're educating him right now at Harvard University. And Jason, would you take a look at this?
Sunny Hostin's tendency to turn arguments into emotional sound bites is another target. Megyn Kelly frames it as performance more than analysis. Hostin with furrowed brows and finger raised like a strict teacher, but rarely grounding the point in specifics. In that framing, the details fade, and what remains is the act of outrage itself. Kelly turns it into satire, suggesting the delivery can feel more like a spoken-word performance than journalism, engaging in short bursts but lacking substance when you look for evidence underneath. She also highlights how Sunny's approach stays within a safe lane of predictable reactions, where approval is built in and real pushback is limited. From that angle, Kelly characterizes the formula as more about reinforcing a narrative than testing it, designed to resonate with a familiar audience rather than challenge it.
Here's Sunny Hostin over on The View, accusing Israel of war crimes.
There is an international human rights body of law. And when you look at that law, part of it is retaliation against innocent civilians collectively is also terror and is also a war crime.
What Israel is saying consistently is, if you want your water, if you want your electricity, release our hostages. In my view, that's exactly not an...
The hypocrisy becomes the sharpest edge of the roast. Sunny Hostin presents herself as a champion of women, yet she is often portrayed as dismissive toward those who don't share her worldview. She speaks about empathy while also coming across as harsh toward opposing voices. She calls for open conversation, yet is shown as quickly shutting down disagreement. Megyn Kelly, who has faced criticism from many sides and continued to push forward, finds plenty of humor in those contradictions. The roast lands because it plays on a familiar idea, that Sunny's influence works best inside the controlled environment of a studio setting. Outside of that space, the performance feels less solid. In this framing, Sunny is not seen as the bold legal thinker or fearless truth-teller she presents herself as, but more as a predictable media personality, repeating familiar talking points for reaction and applause. Kelly sharpens that contrast, suggesting it's more about presentation than impact, more about performance than truth. And in the end, the image being built starts to feel less stable, as the consistency of the pattern becomes the main point itself.
Listen to Sunny Hostin, it's not night.
I do think that there is a thing called pretty privilege. There is a thing called white privilege. There is a thing called tall privilege. And we have to acknowledge that. And unfortunately, there still is that stigma of against the LGBTQ plus community. 70% of the WNBA is black. A third of the players are in the LGBTQ plus community. I think that people have a problem with basketball playing women that are lesbians. Who cares? They are great athletes.
What do you mean? They're queer plus trans?
They're trans?
Actually, they will have trans. They're going to have a washed up 38-year-old NBA player who's 6'8", 250, and he's going to realize I'm averaging 1 point and I actually just got cut from the Knicks, and I'm going to go and I'm going to average a triple-double, 30 points a game, and I'm going to put on a dress and they're going to call me Sally.
Megyn Kelly doesn't stop at tearing down the theatrics. She goes after the idea behind the brand itself. Sunny Hostin presents herself as a voice for the voiceless, but Kelly suggests that somehow, every issue still circles back to Hostin herself. From that angle, Kelly reframes the commentary not as a lens on the world, but as a mirror reflecting personal grievances. The humor is sharp and deliberate. Hostin isn't just analyzing injustice, she's performing it. Every segment becomes a display of outrage where she plays both the critic and the centerpiece. Kelly also targets what she sees as the comfort of the format, panel discussions where applause is expected and disagreement is limited. In that setting, she argues, it's easy to look bold without ever truly being tested. In contrast, Kelly defines real courage as facing real pushback, standing in the fire without relying on a supportive echo chamber. The punchline lands on a simple contradiction. Sunny's polished image becomes, in this framing, a kind of costume over weaker arguments. As Kelly puts it, it's like dressing up mediocrity in designer packaging.
People like Sunny Hostin, who's upset about her white privilege and her pretty privilege. You know, Sunny Hostin's out there openly admitting to how much cosmetic work she's had done. So just take a seat on your pretty privilege. Okay, it's not just Sunny. There's sports writers Jamel Hill. She's met. And one other point, okay, because this one's just so annoying. One other point. Why is it a problem that the majority of WNBA players are black and Caitlin Collins, who's Caitlin Clark?
At the end of the day, it still feels like a soapbox. Then comes the tone of moral certainty. Sunny Hostin doesn't just present her arguments, she delivers them as if they're beyond question. Morally, intellectually, and even personally untouchable. Megyn Kelly doesn't just push back on that attitude, she breaks it apart. In her framing, Sunny's sense of superiority becomes a crutch. Something that props up arguments when they aren't strong enough on their own. Kelly turns it into satire, comparing the dynamic to a professor demanding respect without ever having to prove it through real-world scrutiny. She then contrasts the image with influence, suggesting that outside the controlled environment of daytime television, Sunny doesn't carry the same weight. She's not widely shaping discourse or driving major conversations in the broader culture. From that perspective, Kelly leans into a harsher metaphor. Someone who appears important within a frame but doesn't necessarily hold that same status beyond it. Finally, she challenges the idea of deflecting criticism through identity alone, framing it as a way of avoiding real debate rather than engaging with it.
What I found out was that my mother's family, while they are Puerto Rican, they actually originate from Spain. And the reason that they moved to Puerto Rico is because the slave trade had been sort of canceled in Spain and then Curacao, and then they moved all of their slaves to Puerto Rico. And so the family business, I have been told that they were printers and journalists, but they were in fact enslavers. At first I was deeply disappointed.
The slave thing is a bummer.
It's a bummer. I
can't control it.
I still believe, I still believe in reparations, by the way, so y'all can stop texting me and emailing me and saying that I'm a white girl and that I don't deserve reparations.
Okay, I'm not going to text you or email you, but it's true.
Yes, there's nothing worse than to find out you're a white woman.
Megyn Kelly leans into what she sees as Sunny Hostin's biggest flaw, an inability to laugh at herself. In Kelly's framing, comedy depends on self-awareness, but Hostin comes across as so serious and self-important that even simple moments of delivery can feel unintentionally humorous. Rather than needing exaggeration, Kelly suggests the material already exists in the way Hostin presents herself. The tone, the pauses, the moral certainty, all of it becomes part of the joke without any extra effort. From that perspective, Kelly paints Hostin as someone who doesn't realize how she appears from the outside, almost like a satire character who never notices the irony of her own performance. As the critique builds, Hostin is portrayed less as a hard-hitting commentator and more as a familiar TV persona shaped by a controlled environment of predictable reactions and supportive audiences. In the end, Kelly's point lands on perception versus impact, suggesting that outside that space, the influence is far more limited than the on-air confidence would imply.